So now imagine as a developer, you want to build something disruptive that, is competing with Twitch or YouTube or serving a different segment or something. Do you want to be spending the majority of the money that you make or that you're investing for infrastructure directly to your competitor, like paying direct to Amazon or to Google when you're competing with them? And if every dollar you make, 90 cents of it is going straight to your competitor. That's not a great starting point, right? What's an alternative? Like, how can there be an independent infrastructure at the scale globally to compete with this, right?
It takes a long time to create hardware. First job from out of school was at NVIDIA, and I worked there, and I worked on the drivers team. It takes about at that time, it took about 2 to 3 years for a new chip to go from into being fabricated, right? There are all these different steps in the middle, and there's also risk in the middle that this chip might never get delivered. You may go in a year and a half into the process, and then you realize this chip was faulty for whatever reason that is good, right? Or the manufacturing was not the right one, and then it just completely fails.
It's interesting that Sora is OpenAI, which I imagine all of that is running on Azure servers, right? So it's again back to the cloud providers. And if you're a new video startup, new AI video startup, which I imagine many of them are getting funded to kind of go after this problem right now. They're again back to building on these cloud providers and competing with the in-house efforts that each of them have. Hey everyone, this is Sina with another episode of Into the Bytecode. My guests today are Eric Tang and Doug Petkanics, co-founders of Livepeer. Livepeer is a distributed video streaming network built on Ethereum. It combines a token, economic incentives, and an open media server to facilitate video streaming on the internet. In this conversation, we talked about a whole bunch of things, including why this is a problem worth working on, with video's increasingly important role on the internet, and how Livepeer is able to provide a 90% cost improvement over cloud providers like AWS by putting excess compute capacity in the world to work. We talk about the impact of generative AI on video and how the network might evolve to service this need. We also talked about what they've learned in their journey to finding product market fit and how they more recently built Livepeer Studio as a SaaS product that abstracts away the complexity of the protocol and that a developer can use just as they would any other video streaming platform. I initially met Doug and Eric back in 2017 when I was working on TrueBit, and we were collaborating on some research directions. And I've always admired how they've consistently shipped and stayed true to a vision that they believe in over a span of 7+ years at this point. I also want to say that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not financial advice, and that the host and the guests may hold positions in the projects discussed. And with that, I'll leave you to it. Into the Bytecode is sponsored by Optimism. The Optimism Collective is building the open source modular software project known as the OP Stack, which allows developers to run layer 2 blockchains, while also addressing key governance and economic challenges in the wider ecosystem. Optimism is also leading decentralized grants experiments, like retroactive public goods funding, which recently granted 10 million OP to projects across developer tooling, infrastructure, and education. More recently, they had a major milestone by adding Coinbase's blockchain Base to also be governed by Optimism governance, and also contribute a portion of their sequencer revenues back to the collective. I've known the Optimism team for many years and know that they're dedicated to both scaling Ethereum and extending its ability to build better economic structures. So, if you're interested in learning more, whether you want to build something new or you want to apply for grant funding, then I encourage you to check out Optimism at optimism.io. So I thought a good place to start would be really with what motivated you to work on this problem in the first place. And I remember, Eric in one of our earlier conversations, and then I also chatted with Yandin ahead of this, and he reminded me that you were working on you were building your previous company. You were building on a number of the existing kind of like social APIs, and you experienced this kind of historical thing we hear about, which is that they kind of turned off their APIs or started competing with the products that were building on the platforms themselves. And you kind of experienced this firsthand, and it led to your motivation to really kind of explore crypto more deeply. So I'm curious if you could share the kind of like origin story of how you started to work on Livepeer.
Yep, that's exactly right. You articulated the pain that we went through as entrepreneurs building on a third-party platform that could rug you at any time. So just to back up a little bit, I'm Doug Petkanics, Eric Tang, my co-founders here. We've been working together on multiple startups over the years, maybe for the last 13, 14 years, always sort of in the data infrastructure and sort of edge technology space. And first startup worked out great. Second startup, as you were alluding to, we were building kind of as the whole internet was shifting from desktop to mobile. And we were creating this platform that would let people, publishers, push their content into the mobile apps and channels where people were consuming them, inside of Facebook, inside of Twitter, inside of Pinterest, inside of Google search results. And as all of those platforms were saying, hey, everything's shifting to mobile, we need to let publishers and stores and e-commerce platforms push their experiences in here. They created APIs to let them do that, to let them create cards, we called them, or little interactive units inside of tweets, inside of Facebook posts. And so we created this great technology platform that could make it easy for those publishers and those stores to move their content and make things purchasable or readable, natively inside of those apps. And then over time, all of those apps said, actually, it's a little chaotic. We don't want third parties controlling the experience. We don't want developers designing, what things look like inside of our platform. We need to lock these down. We need to figure out how to monetize around them, or get our cut of transactions, or get our advertisements inserted inside of articles and whatnot. And they actually closed their developer APIs and their open developer platforms to companies like us, and they started working direct with the publishers and with the merchants, and ended up controlling the relationship. So we're in this frustrating position where everything that we thought would happen in the world happened, but we didn't get to be a part of it, and it sort of create a lot of challenges for us operating that business, which is a whole long story.
What timeline are we talking about here? What years were these?
This is probably 2013 through 2016,
right?
If you will.
Yeah.
Right. And so fast forward to 2016, we said, man, like never again do we want to be subject to the whims of, Twitter, Google, Facebook, Pinterest, and other closed big tech platforms for our startups' distribution and existence. We only want to build on open technologies and open platforms. And lo and behold, one of the most exciting new open developer platforms the world's ever seen, called Ethereum, had sort of just launched and just come to maturity. And you know better than anyone what it's like to go down the rabbit hole as a developer of experiencing what can you do on this open access world computer that lets you embed economic incentives into software for the first time. And from that point we were hooked. So I'll pause there for a moment, but happy to talk about how we arrived at what we're working on today, Livepeer, from that moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, maybe talk about and how Livepeer got started and what Livepeer is, and then we can wade into deeper waters.
Sure, Eric, you want to give a bit of a Livepeer background?
Yeah, I'd say when we first started experimenting with just like blockchain-based technology in general, we actually looked at a couple of different ecosystems. Steam was actually one that we were pretty interested in. It was a social platform, and we were back then. I remember Dan from Steam and Vitalik from Ethereum. They were kind of the two almost like public blockchain architects that were always dueling it out in the public about like the types of architectures that should be implemented and the trade-offs. So that was actually a number one, really entertaining to be just like watching and participating. Also, number two, super educational, right? As developers and technical people, just understanding what are all the implications, what are all the design, not only the design principles, but the motivations behind different architecture and the kind of the direction. So over time, we started hacking on some open source project in the Ethereum ecosystem. Believe it or not, Doug was one of the people who were involved in the early designs of ERC 721. Creating we very much thought about what it would be like to create an NFT platform, things like that. But we continued to develop and got pretty close to the Swarm team at Ethereum at the time, and who was building a decentralized storage solution that was going to be a part of the Ethereum core stack. And we, with our experience building our last startup, we had to deal with a lot of video streaming, and we also had this friend who was building his startup within our office, and he was building a live streaming company, and at the time, we just saw how he struggled with all the underlying technology. It was like there was no great tools out there to build live streaming companies. And with those combined, we were just interested in streaming in general. So we started building video streaming aspects into the Ethereum core stack in the same way that kind of Swarm was kind of building data storage and collaborating with the Swarm team quite a lot. And so, believe it or not, the first version of Livepeer was actually a Geth node. In Geth nodes streaming videos to each other as a part of the Ethereum, really cool. As a part of the Swarm node. And things kind of evolved from there. We thought about different reasons why you would want a video streaming platform that's decentralized, and that continued to evolve to kind of what we are today.
Yeah, I think if you looked at this really exciting open developer platform of Ethereum and you looked at the different layers that were being built, there was obviously financial layers and sort of general purpose smart contracting capabilities. There was file storage layers being built in the app stack. There was messaging layers being built, but there really was a gap for, I guess, more real-time or richer media, if you will, video streaming, audio streaming, et cetera. And as Eric said, it aligned with our interest and our excitement, our belief in video from the work we'd done in the previous startup. We obviously think video is going to have huge impacts in the world in terms of how we communicate, learn, work, get entertained, et cetera. And decentralization brings a lot of benefits to video infrastructure as well, because it's 80% of the traffic on the internet. You want video computed on and moved around near where people are creating it and consuming it, instead of sending it all to AWS East data center in Virginia before it gets disseminated out to the world. And so the combination of those things led us down the path of building the world's open video infrastructure, and that's been our mission at Livepeer for the last 7+ years. We've been working on it.
Yeah, that's super cool. Why? My sense has been that developers have a much harder time kind of working with video generally than say images, right? And part of this is that just the file format itself is much kind of heavier. But I'm curious, what has been the kind of alternative status quo that people would be using to build a video application in the world today, in a world that, say, Livepeer doesn't exist, or before Livepeer exists?
Yeah, so there are, when we first, things have changed quite a bit in the last 7 years, right? Like when we first started working on Livepeer, let's say developers had much less options, and you would kind of need to almost build your own stack, right? You can get open source software, just stitch them together. There's a piece of software called FFmpeg. It's notorious for how difficult it is to use, because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of parameters that you can pass into this software, and they all mean slightly different things. You have to be an expert on video to understanding the codecs, the frames, and all those things to be able to operate that piece of software, right? And FFmpeg is literally underneath, I don't know, probably 90%, 80% of the world's video infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
And it started out as a project for hobbyists to rip anime DVDs from into like
really
format. Yeah,
like someone just built this open source, because I've heard, I think I've even tinkered with FFmpeg, but that's how it got started.
Yeah. It's I think it was a French guy. Well, I think he was French. He, anime lover, wanted a computer programmer wanted to get the DVDs onto his computer. There was no good tools for it, and then he just wrote the first version. But that was the status quo, right? You have to understand FFmpeg. You have to build your own software on top, but over time, people have built API services to make this easier, right? So and most of these API services are built on top of AWS, right? And that's because AWS is much cheaper, or a Google Cloud, right? Or one of those cloud services. The challenge with that is because video is so expensive and it's actually really complex to operate, right? That added on top of the really expensive infrastructure that the cloud services provide creates just a much more expensive product for the developer, right? So you kind of have these two layers of complexity and cost on top of each other.
Like the running the infrastructure is expensive, and then the bandwidth and the kind of like processing power to just handle the video itself is also expensive.
That's right.
Yeah, just think about, like, we've been using the consumer internet for 30 plus years, and you still struggle to get a video to play without buffering, or to have this conversation without one of us, cutting out, or the audio pausing. It's so much data to move across these fragile internet networks with so little tolerance for any error, right? Because especially in real time in a live stream, if you are waiting for packets to arrive for just a couple hundred milliseconds more, they're not there in time in order to create a smooth video stream. So there's this whole wave of many technologies, many standards, many formats, many protocols to meet different use cases that sort of are all part of the building blocks that video developers need to use and understand if they're going to create a good experience. And then the infrastructure underlying it has to work fast enough in real time. And that infrastructure is not controlled by one person. It's the internet. It's chaotic. There's a million service providers, interchange points. These packets are traveling around the world, right? And so you can just get a sense of how complex video is under the hood. And if it's 80% of the bandwidth on the internet, you get a sense of how expensive it is to do video well.
Yeah. That's a kind of a courageous thing to go after this problem, because I feel like it's such an unforgiving problem statement, like you're saying, right? If a video has a tiny lag, or if it buffers in the middle of a call, you just completely lose that sense of presence. So it needs to be, and people, consumers are very unforgiving in how they make these choices. You use a video. I had this experience with Riverside, a couple of times to cut out, and I left it behind, and then I came back because they're, but people move away and they don't come back. So the thing really needs to work. I guess what has given you the sense that building this in a kind of open networked way, one, works, which I think it does today based on what I've, seen, applications I've seen built on Livepeer. But then two, why can it outcompete kind of centralized providers, which usually, through the vertical integration, they have an edge in the kind of like reliability and quality of service they can provide at the expense of, say, censorship resistance, or maybe pricing or something like that.
Yeah, I think the centralized providers deliver a pretty reliable experience, but like I said, video is very challenging. If you want to do it at scale, you have no choice but to reserve sort of enough computing capacity to handle your peak traffic, right? Because like when there's peak traffic, you have to have enough servers and bandwidth available to deliver, right? And so if you're and this has to exist all around the world. And so there's actually only a few, computing providers out there in the world that have that sort of scale to be reliable to build your live streaming, your live video experience around if you're going to be handling a lot of streams, a lot of traffic, et cetera. Unsurprisingly, it's the big public clouds, right? The Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts. And so, their servers are already marked up, 4x from what a bare metal server would cost. And then they're putting these video services on top of them. And you have to reserve enough capacity to handle your peak traffic, even when your traffic is here. Right. And so there's a lot of inefficiency and overhead and waste in that. Right. But our thesis was, and also that's because, like I said, they have this economy of scale. They have these servers around the world. So therefore they can put those, those extra layers of cost on because there's no alternatives of where you can go to. By the way, before I talk about decentralized advantage, it's also worth noting that those big cloud platforms, Amazon, Google, they own Twitch and YouTube, the big streaming applications that they amass the most traffic and that they want everyone to use, right? So now imagine as a developer, you want to build something disruptive that, is competing with Twitch or YouTube or serving a different segment or something. Do you want to be spending the majority of the money that you make or that you're investing for infrastructure directly to your competitor, like paying direct to Amazon or to Google, when you're competing with them, and if every dollar you make, 90 cents of it is going straight to your competitor? That's not a great starting point, right? So now let's shift over to, what's an alternative? How can there be an independent infrastructure at the scale globally to compete with this, right? So I think there's this recognition that, hey, no single entity has all the servers deployed with the capacity to power these scaled video streaming apps. But there's a lot of unused capacity out there in the world that's already bought, deployed, paid for, and running, maybe in other business models that are sitting idle. There's tons of GPUs that can do video encoding. There's tons of data centers that have, excess bandwidth to deliver video that they're not using at the current moment. And what's been missing? Well, what's been missing is a method of coordinating all of those resources and making them available to come together to create sort of an open cloud. What's missing is the ability to, discover them, settle payments to them, hire them for work, right? But this just so happens to be exactly what blockchain technology can enable, what a network like Ethereum can enable. It creates this open access sort of permissionless coordination protocol that lets anyone with additional servers say, hey, I have available capacity. Hire me to encode your video. Here's what I'm charging. And by the way, if someone in the next data center has cards and they say, I'm charging less, hire me. Well, that's great for the consumer because they're getting the results of price competition. And certainly a centralized provider could try and enable this, but you're trusting them. They have to run this coordination point. They're probably gating access. They're probably gating payments. They probably have legal overhead in the jurisdiction they are. They have contracts, terms of service, et cetera. All of that creates, trust, and it creates overhead. Whereas, blockchain networks like Ethereum let you do this permissionlessly and, hand waving past a lot of the hard implementation details. But what you get is you should get this, super competitive marketplace where everyone with compute and bandwidth can compete, and therefore you get the lowest cost infrastructure. Because it's such low cost, you can afford redundancies and failovers, and you should get the highest possible reliability with no central single points of failure, right? And you should get, we can talk about this, sort of near infinite scale, because there's so much capacity out there available that's sort of competing for this work that you can burst up to as much as you need without having to pre-reserve that capacity in advance with one data center that you have a contract with, where you do a pre-buy. And so that combination, infinite scale, maximally effective cost, ultimate reliability, should be really, really powerful and should enable a great alternative infrastructure to just going to the public clouds. And I think that's a lot of the thesis behind what we've been working on at Livepeer.
That's very compelling. Do you have a sense for, when you say it's the excess compute capacity that people have available, What's the scale of that? And what's the scale of like net new compute that you think people will have to connect to this network to make it scale to the video demands of the world?
Yep. So when I talk about compute, we're typically talking about video encoding. Right. To date, right? I'd love to talk about AI video processing in the future. We're excited about that, but video transcoding essentially. There just so happens to be like the types of cards that do video encoding are called GPUs, graphical processing units. It just so happens that there's many use cases for these GPUs, and there's hundreds of thousands, millions of them deployed for these other use cases. One in particular is cryptocurrency mining, especially pre-merge days in Ethereum. And there's many mining data centers that had tens, hundreds of thousands of these GPUs. To give you a sense of scale, oh, and by the way, those GPUs happen to have video encoding and decoding chips on them, like ASICs that are only for video encoding and decoding, that are not used by any of these cryptocurrency mining operations. So there's hundreds of thousands of cards deployed, millions of cards deployed. They're being used for mining, but they can also be used for video encoding. So just to give you a sense of scale, I think 2 to 3 of these medium-sized mining operations in their mining data centers have enough video encoding capacity to encode all the streams of YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook combined at any given moment. And so you get a sense that there's so much capacity available out there in the world that's sort of not being put to use, where the supply side scale for this video encoding is one of the least concerns of building a network like this. I think a lot bigger concern is just on the demand side. How do you productize? How do you bring this to market? How do you fit it into the market in a compelling way? And yeah, we can get to, Eric can walk you through some of our long-standing efforts on that front.
For sure. Yeah, I want to get into that, but maybe before we go there, that's so cool. And I know that GPUs have many different use cases in the world, like from gaming to cryptocurrency mining to training AI models and just any kind of computation that can be parallelized. But my sense was that, I guess at least I know with the kind of more AI focused chips, like the H100, they no longer have the video capabilities, right? They're like very specifically tuned to the kind of matrix computations that need to happen. But this is a very, very cool kind of like artifact of history that all of this cryptocurrency mining equipment has this capacity.
Yep, that's right. And I think it's even questionable whether you should call a special purpose high density AI training thing a GPU anymore. Right. It's just an evolution of hardware for a specific purpose. Right. But these media oriented computing devices, the GPUs that are used for gaming, for rendering, for video processing, right? They typically have a combination of, different chips on there, some for video encoding, decoding, the CUDA cores for sort of the more general purpose parallelized compute, as well as, potentially other things as well. So a whole range of hardware that exists for many purposes. And I think the point is, if you can coordinate an easy way for them to, monetize that hardware's potential when it's not otherwise used, or even when just parts of it are not otherwise used, you can sort of aggregate the supply in a competitive marketplace, which should be good for, the demand side that wants to use it.
Yeah. Maybe one more thing to double click on here before we move on. And Eric, feel free to jump in also. What's your sense of how the overall kind of chip and computing capacity arc of the world is evolving through time? Because there's a lot, and I know this is maybe something that you've thought of in the background. And if the case with Livepeer is that the kind of supply side is really not the bottleneck, maybe it's something that you haven't thought about as much. But it's pretty interesting just from the kind of like ground level of it with, say, the TSMC being in Taiwan to NVIDIA, being the dominant kind of a producer and then on the demand side, it's also changing a lot, right? With AI potentially having, near infinite demand for compute. And I guess what's your sense of, if you zoom out and try to kind of think about the arc of history and how this might evolve, how do you think about that?
I mean, my personal perspective, right? Like overall, there's definitely like the demand for compute continues to grow. Then we see that it grows at a faster and faster pace. I think it's interesting to keep in mind that it takes a long time to create hardware, right? Like so my first job from out of school was at NVIDIA, and I worked there.
Oh wow!
And, I worked on the drivers team, and so kind of it takes about at that time it took about 2 to 3 years for a new chip to go from design to being fabricated, right? And there are all these different steps in the middle that and there's also risk in the middle that this chip might never get delivered. You may go in a year and a half into the process, and then you realize this chip was faulty for whatever reason. The design was not good, right? Or the manufacturing technique was not the right one, and then it just completely fails, right? So there NVIDIA has obviously perfected that process of delivering the chip, and they have an amazing team that do this, but that lag is interesting because anything that we think of today, any obvious thing that we think of today that should be put into hardware, that hardware will only exist 2 to 3 years from now, right? But you continue to see this type of growth of demand, right? NVIDIA continue to put out more and more new cards that seem to all be really that seem to all hit in the market, and that tells me that the amount of signal in the market that gives these card manufacturers the confidence to do the multi-million-dollar investment to create these cards is very, very strong, right? And it comes from all different places. So in general, I think that continues to grow. Clearly, AI is going to continue to push this even further, right? But from all kinds of computation. Video-based computation is only going to get more demanding as well because the internet bandwidth is getting better, which means we can get better and better video quality through the wires. The video codecs are getting better, which means for the same quality of video, you would use more compute to compress it to use less bandwidth, right? So now, if you
take the hit on the compute and the compression so that it's a lighter weight when it's being transitioned through the wires. That's right. Yeah, and because hardware is fixed cost, right? It just continues to get better. So when you buy a computer, that computer just the hardware on the computer just continues to get better, right? So the codec is going to continue to get better. The compression is going to continue to get better. Bandwidth is limited. Right, so we always want to fit more video into the same amount of bandwidth, right? So that means the compute needs to get better to fit more video through the bandwidth, higher quality through the bandwidth. There's very clear studies that show, the higher quality the videos are, the more engaged the users become, right? So these are incentive structures that have not changed for 10, 15 years at this point that have created this huge demand of compute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems like we're at this really interesting moment in time with these sort of artificial, I don't know if artificial is right, but these constraints, you mentioned, TSMC is this single underlying card at the bottom of the pile that is a huge centralization risk at the moment. But I think that's recognized not just by savvy entrepreneurs, but by entire industry segments across up to nation state and political level. as well, right? You also see this like supply constraint right now where, hey, the AI boom it sort of just came on everyone's radar. The current generation of NVIDIA cards, A100, H100s, were the must-have things. There's a shortage. You can only get them if you do $100 million plus buys. You can only rent them if you reserve a year worth of capacity from one of those, those purchasers in advance. But at the same time, what do you see? You see like billions, trillions of dollars being invested in many other efforts and attempts to sort of eliminate these risks or to capture opportunity in this boom. You see things like NVIDIA even innovating itself with the new Blackwell cards coming soon, and therefore maybe these cards that everyone reserved for years are maybe not going to be the state of the art, but they're going to have all this capacity. And I think what you'll see is just like the markets catching up. You'll see the result of all this overinvestment or this rapid investment catch up. There is a time lag, as Eric said, but eventually that should result in hopefully a more decentralized, more open, competitive market that follows the supply demand curves and laws of economics, just like any other industry.
So you think maybe kind of analogous to the .com era of how the telecom companies were laying down wires in anticipation of the internet demand, and then overshot the level of demand that would be there in the short term, and and then there was this like glut of supply for a long period of time that then the internet grew into. Do you think like something similar might happen here with compute capacity?
It's all about price, right? So it's like you can always access the compute capacity that you need for the right price, and it's just where does that price fall? Right. So is there infinite demand? Sure, there's infinite demand if it's free. There's not infinite demand if it's at a certain price. But what I think you will see is I think that right now there's a lot being built, a lot of capacity being provisioned. Everyone's sort of over investing. They're going to have this capacity they've reserved, but maybe is being inefficiently utilized. Like they had to reserve it because there's no other way to get it, but it's being inefficiently utilized. And if you have open marketplaces that can allow you to actually utilize or monetize your capacity when it's not being used, then they're going to want to recoup some cost, and that's going to create some competition. It should be competitive, and you'll find, the downward price pressures that puts on compute as production catches up over the 2 to 3 to 10 year span that, Eric was alluding to. But, I don't think this opportunity is lost on anyone. So I think anyone with capital is deploying it, and there's a lot of investment going into it.
Yeah, it's almost the perfect setup for what you've been working on. I just listened to the set of podcasts by Acquired about the history of NVIDIA. I don't know if you've listened to them. They're very, very good. They're like 8 hours of content. But there's this kind of, in the arc of NVIDIA itself, they were primarily focused on building graphical processing units for games. And then almost accidentally, they realized that there's this notion of scientific computing that then was like the early harbinger of AI. And they, bet the company on that. And then that market grew to be, I think gaming is still a substantial part of their business, but the kind of AI piece is like growing really fast. And I feel like I wonder how you think about this question through the lens of Livepeer, which is that you've been focused on this question of video, and video itself is a huge market based on, like you're saying. But is there anything about what you've been building that is specific to video rather than this kind of compute capacity and helping match supply and demand in a more kind of like organic way?
Yeah. So just fast forwarding really far ahead, we have this big network of GPUs. There's obviously demand for GPUs to perform AI inference and AI related compute, right? And we have a marketplace where these providers want to earn money with their GPUs. And so this is a big initiative within Livepeer to bring AI computing onto the network in addition to video transcoding. But back to your question, is there something unique that we've built that's specific to video? This gets a little bit into sort of the go-to-market and the demand side adoption building we've been doing over the years. But, our mission is world's open video infrastructure, and the surrounding open software to use it. And everything that we've done has been guided by what's the video specific use case that's targeted to, the builder of a video experience or a video application. And in order to deliver on that, there is so much non-trivial product and software and hosted services and workflows that are specific to video. If you're going to build a great video experience or video AI experience, you need to ingest video, transcode video, store video, have a player to playback video, have analytics on video, have monitoring on video performance, have developer SDKs to embed video into mobile, into web, into all this stuff. And so Livepeer's sort of differentiator versus any other generic, compute platform, be it whether it's transcoding or generative AI video, is the surrounding video stack and video software that the video developer will use to deliver a great video experience. And like you said, video is a huge market, hundreds of billions of dollars. It's how we spend a lot of our day engaging is over video and consuming contents over video. And so even if it's not as enormous as just general purpose compute for everything, it's where we have unique advantage because of all the software, the community, the network, surrounding services built around video. Yeah,
that makes sense. So yeah, let's dive into that. And I think this is, bringing in Livepeer Studio, which I think Eric's been working on. But what you shared earlier is the perfect setup, right? Where the costs for using video in your application as a developer are very high. And not only is it high, you're paying that cost to companies that own your two biggest competitors, which is not a good setup. So it seems like the kind of setup is right for something like Livepeer or a productized lens on this Livepeer protocol to succeed. So yeah, what's that journey been like? And I feel like you've had this shift from focusing on the protocol, or not this shift, but in addition to working on the protocol, working on a product on top of the protocol for application developers to use this stuff.
Yeah, at the very beginning, there was very much focus on the protocol, right? Like most blockchain, crypto-based project back in 2016, 2017, we started out by writing a white paper. And we spent a lot of time writing the white paper and getting reviewed and all that. We launched the white paper, and the white paper was a really good way to build a community around the project, right? For the right people to show up and collaborate. And over time, I think we started building tooling. We started building the protocol, and then launched the protocol, launched a token, build tooling around it. The learning is that the blockchain-based ecosystem is just very nascent and very new, right? And so in order for the Livepeer project for the Livepeer network to really get a lot of demand, we had to look at all places and see where the demand actually is. Or where the latent demand is, so that we can build into that. So that took many iterations of experimentation and building our products and try and go to market and tweaking things, right? That's your startup journey of go to market, right? And it's just it's trial and error, and you learn your lessons, you'll make your best guesses. So we've built a number of iterations along the way. In the past few iterations, is where Livepeer Studio came into play, and the lesson there is really for people to easily for this infrastructure network to grow, we need to build really easy access points to this infrastructure, right? And what do video developers actually want? Because video itself is already, like you said, inherently complex and difficult to use. They really need good tooling, right? And easy ways to put video into their products. Because if I'm developing a product that has video components, I actually don't want to spend time thinking about video. I actually want to spend time thinking about how to make my product good, how to make my user use my product better. The more time I'm thinking about making my video work better, it's less time I'm thinking about making my business good, right? So the goal for Livepeer Studio is really to take all of that complexity away from the application developer and just make it as easy as possible for them to figure out how to make their application better. And so we have a bunch of Web3 based tooling in Studio, but more and more we're realizing that just by focusing on making video really easy to use for a generic developer, that creates a lot of demand for the Livepeer network. Right? So now for Livepeer Studio, we very much look at just looking at it with simplicity, almost like purely as a SaaS business, right? Like what are the verticals for this business? What are the tools for these that the developers in these verticals need, and how do we run a go-to-market strategy to go capture that demand, right? So right now we have a decent amount of usage from social applications, all kinds of social apps. We have a feature that does real-time interactive live streaming with really, really cost-effective pricing, right? Same as something like an Amazon IVS or Agora, but 80% or 90% more cost-effective than those services. And so that enables new demand and new types of applications to be built, and that's where we're focusing on that.
What is the thought process that a developer or entrepreneur kind of picking their video service provider goes through? How do they think about this decision?
It's a really important decision because you're kind of like building your whole business, your core business on top, right? So it typically take a while for them to decide. You first need to understand like exactly what type of experience are you trying to build, and from there, there's a number of vendors out there that allows you to accomplish that. Then you probably need to like evaluate at least a few of them, right? And you need to probably build prototypes and actually have hands-on experience with a number of them. And then maybe through a period of time, you can pick one that you'll start to work with, right? So it's a multi-dimensional decision between, I'd say, the product capability and the quality of service and the price and the type of support that you're able to get, right? And so but eventually you have to make.
Into the Bytecode is sponsored by Privy. One of the biggest problems we're grappling with as builders working on crypto-enabled applications is how to make the right trade-offs between user experience on the one hand and security and privacy on the other hand. How do we promote self-custody and ownership while letting the application shine rather than the crypto behind it? So Privy plays an important role here. They provide simple onboarding so anyone can connect to your app easily, by allowing them to sign in with an existing wallet, or by making it easy for you to provision a new self-custodial wallet for them, linking to social logins like Google, Twitter, or Discord. I personally have faith in Privy because of the team. Henry Stern, who's one of the co-founders, was previously on an episode of this podcast, so you can listen to that conversation for more of a deep dive. And he and his partner, Asta Lee, have been thinking about data privacy and security for a long, long time. And you can see this in the level of thought they're putting into the product. So if you're working on a new product and thinking about how to reach a wider group of users without compromising on either user experience or privacy and security, then I encourage you to check out Privy at privy.io. What do you emphasize in that sales process? Do you find it's helpful to talk about the fact that this is a distributed network behind the scenes, or do you kind of abstract that away? And is that something that gives folks anxiety to know that, like, how is this network even working? There's like a token involved. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah. For I'd say for most people, we don't talk about it, or we talk about it on a very high level, right?
Right.
We talk about, oh, this is a marketplace-based dynamic. Like we work with independent data center operators instead of, or infrastructure operators instead of building on top of Amazon, right? And that's why we're able to provide this 80-90% cost savings, right? Because people oftentimes are surprised. They're like, how can you provide 80% cost
like it's
savings?
almost a red flag goes up of this is too good to be true.
Yeah. So we use that to kind of explain, but most of the process is focused on understanding the exact needs and pain points of the prospect, of the customer, and communicating how Livepeer Studio's product actually help them solve that pain point.
There's this interesting dynamic where, in previous iterations, sort of the exploration was very Web3 centric, right? We believe that blockchain and Web3 will lead to better social media experiences, creator economy experiences. And so we want these new things to be built, with their video components powered by Livepeer. And sure enough, that works in the sense that many of them are built on Livepeer, like a lot of the sort of Web3 centric streaming experiences, whether it's like Unlonely and the Farcaster ecosystem, or a lot of the leading Lens protocol social applications, are built using Livepeer. And that's great. You could say like we're a market leader there, and people who care about decentralized technologies, infrastructures, open access, et cetera, come to Livepeer, get that benefit. And so it's great. And we're like the market leader, but that's a very small amount of the number of minutes or fees that flow through the network come from those sources, because they're nascent, they're building up. None of them have taken off with the hockey stick growth yet. Whereas, as Eric was alluding to, maybe in the more traditional streaming world, they care much more about the cost effectiveness, the reliability, the features that fit into their existing workflows. And lo and behold, even though maybe the market that pays attention to decentralized tech projects doesn't care that this random, enterprise company they've never heard of is using Livepeer, lo and behold, that drives, a majority of the fees into the network, or, millions of minutes of usage into the network each week, relative to sort of the smaller Web3. But that's like a more crowded, competitive space with a lot of incumbents and not as much risk tolerance. And so, doing the experiments, navigating and finding the right way to communicate the value proposition that fit for the market has been the ongoing effort.
Yeah. How do you guys think about that kind of external market, and like how have you how has your thinking around like what are the different archetypes in there, and what are the needs that they have, and the size of those markets, like if in any way it's instructive to kind of share how your thinking has evolved on that? I'm very curious to learn more.
I think one dimension that I personally use is time, right? And so time and risk is kind of the two way that I think about it, because markets, as entrepreneurs, right? Like we're always trying to build into something that we have conviction on that's going to grow, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that I think we're all trying to find is like the product that no one is asking for, but everyone needs under the hood, right? So that there's a certain amount of like latentness to it. So you're trying to find like the latent demand that people are not aware of yet, or maybe a small number of people are aware of, but it's going to be big, right? Because if it's big already, then it's too competitive. That you don't want to be in there, right? So that's how I think about it. It's that requires like learning about a specific market, understanding what are the dynamic and what's innovative about it, what are the innovators in that space actually trying to do, and then building some conviction around kind of the time frame of that, how quickly will that demand actually grow in a 6, 12, 18 months kind of time horizon, and then understanding what product, because in order to fit into that demand, you have to build some product. It's never just like, oh, it fits in perfectly. So, building convictions around what's our capability to build a compelling product that can actually capture that demand when the demand gets here. Right. So trying to make that.
These are like almost like multiple sequential kind of startup founding moments where you're like understanding a segment and like betting on the fact that it's going to grow over time and that you'll have the ability to kind of provide the solution to the problems they're facing.
Yeah, that's how I think about it. And just looking at the startup's journey, most startups are constantly making those bets, right? Like, it's very rare that a startup makes one bet and it hits so well that that's just the startup. Sometimes it happens. Like Twitter was an example, and it just but that was also after lots of previous experimentations that were failed, right? For that company. So, I think for most startups, you're always making some bets, seeing how that plays out. Capturing the benefits of making that bet if it plays well, but then you kind of need to continue to make bets based on that.
Yeah. So what are your current bets? How do you think about the future of video applications developing from here?
Yeah, I think one of I'd say there's two big bets, right? One is a lot of what we were just talking about, bringing this polished hosted developer experience to the video market, but with significantly reduced costs due to the network.
This is broad-based, like just as an alternative to the cloud providers, not really targeted to a specific customer segment, but like it's a strong value proposition to have.
Yeah, I mean, there's customer segments that are certainly being targeted, but I think it's like the Livepeer Studio video business being disruptive to the huge video industry. That's sort of the bet we've just been talking about. And then there's this newer sort of big 10-100x bet, unsurprisingly, in a space we were alluding to before, which was, hey, AI is actually sort of one of the fastest growing, most disruptive, and maybe most important technologies of our generation. Generative AI in particular is highly inspirational, particularly when it comes to media-centric use cases, right? So what does it mean that creatives can type a prompt and generate images? What does it mean creators can type a prompt and generate videos? Anyone who's seen the demos of OpenAI Sora, the video platform that OpenAI released some teaser videos for, is just completely inspired by how much this is going to change the world. I think Tyler Perry, the media mogul, paused a $700 million studio investment project and said, we're doing this the wrong way. I'm not investing another dollar until we rethink how we're going to use generative video AI in our production processes. And so anyway, our second big bet here is let's bring AI processing capabilities, in particular generative video AI processing capabilities, into the Livepeer network so that our node operators can perform, low cost inference to generate videos from prompts, from images. And, there's a bunch of other AI related video models that are used in video workflows as well. But why do I call this a huge bet? Obviously, we've seen how many dollars are being spent on compute when it comes to AI. You've seen the growth of NVIDIA's revenue from, $3 billion a quarter a year ago to 10 to 14 to 18 billion a quarter just for these, for use to train and run inference on generative AI models. So obviously it represents the need for a lot of compute. It also represents net new market for developers building new types of experiences when it comes to, generated video instead of just user created video or highly produced video. What new things will we see built? What tools do people need to build them? We don't know yet. These products are very early and immature. They're just meeting the market, but the amount of experimentation is just explosive. The adoption for even raw versions of these things, like the early video diffusion models, are explosive. And so, big bet to spend our time and energy bringing these capabilities to the Livepeer network, and even bigger bets to think about how do you productize? How do you take those things to market? Or how do you develop an ecosystem that is trying to take many different things to market? But I think that's a big focus of our ecosystem and network teams, and at the protocol level at large, while, Studio is continuing to try and grow the video adoption of the core video functionality it's always had.
Right. Because this is another kind of new expression of this problem, which is first you need to kind of train the models. Maybe that happens elsewhere. Maybe it happens on Livepeer. But then once you have the model, then someone's like typing in a prompt, and like that, there's an inference being drawn from that model, and like the longer you wait for your prompts to be executed, the less you enjoy that. And maybe there's entirely new social experiences to be built around that. So it's kind of a new form factor to kind of interface with this underlying Livepeer protocol. It's interesting that like Sora is OpenAI, which I imagine all of that is running on Azure servers, right? So it's again back to the cloud providers. And if you're a new video startup, new AI video startup, which I imagine many of them are getting funded to kind of like go after this problem right now, they're again back to building on these cloud providers and competing with the in-house efforts that each of them have.
Yep, that's right. And OpenAI, ironically, is not an open source model or open company. It's a proprietary model that, no one can modify or tune to their liking. They insert their own biases. You can only access it through them, right? And then, of course, when you do, you're running it on the Microsoft Azure cloud, who, they own 50% of the company, or I forget, is it 49% of the company as well. And so, they have this vertically integrated stack, which, by the way, power to them. Great product, incredible model, really inspirational outcome. They can operate this way as long as there's no artificial roadblocks being inserted that prevent open source models and open access infrastructures from being available, cost effectively to startups, to innovators that maybe don't have access to OpenAI due to the country that they live within, or because they're competing with Microsoft, or the terms of service don't match OpenAI's terms of service or whatnot. There needs to be alternatives. And we haven't talked about some of these regulatory capture barriers that are trying to be put in place at the moment to prevent this sort of open access. But I think it's actually an important moment to make sure that these alternative infrastructures exist.
Yeah, it's like 5D chess being played by all the players. What does the work of incorporating this new capability into the Livepeer network look like? And in case this helps, pull in some developers who wanna work at this intersection.
Awesome. So first, worth clarifying, because you talked about training models, fine-tuning models, inference. A network like Livepeer is not focused on training, which requires many GPUs co-located with tight bandwidth connections to be done efficiently. There's other decentralized tech projects tackling that as well. We're focused on the inference and again, the video or media specific inference. So, the way people always use Livepeer is they have a job. They have a video and they need it to be transcoded. So they submit that job, and their node takes care of getting the network to do it. They don't have to manage GPUs. They don't have to set their own workflow. They just know this job will be complete for a price, right? For adding AI capabilities, we're definitely in like a learning and product discovery phase, but initially we've taken the same approach. We've said, let's treat a particular inference as a job. You give me a prompt, I'll give you back a video, or you give me an image, I'll give you back a video. And the Livepeer node will do all the work required to discover, hey, who are all the providers on the network that say they can do this? What price are they charging? How close to me are they located? Okay, let me try one. Okay, they're not returning it fast enough. Let me fall over to another. That's all sort of abstracted away from the user within the node software and the network. So to add this capability, we're currently at the phase where we've taken a bit of a shortcut. We've taken a Livepeer node and we said, we're going to fork it and we're going to add the AI capabilities. And anyone who wants to be a provider can run that fork, and anyone who wants to use it can run that fork. And we have what we're calling sort of a a subnet or a subnetwork of nodes that speak not just video, but AI. And that's actually
it's
already
like back in the day when you forked Geth.
Exactly. Yeah, you're noticing a pattern here. We just build within these existing systems. It's cool. It's working. It's there's 15 node operators running on a little closed subnet. There's an app that's built on it. Some of them built additional apps. So there's 3 or 4 apps that are already built just a couple months into this project. And you can run the node. You can submit a prompt. You can get a video back, and you can do what you want with it. We have milestones coming up where, hey, we have a lot of iteration to do, making sure it's reliable enough, opening it up for everyone to run nodes so that it can be scalable enough. And we're excited to do that work over the next month to hit some early milestones, and probably 6 months, year to run through the full productionization spectrum. But as always, we're sort of rolling up our sleeves and doing the build and doing the work, and not just hyping, a future vision or a promise that Livepeer will do everything. I think we'll always focus on video. We'll always focus on fitting, how does AI video or generative video fit into video developers' workflows, making sure there's something really useful for them.
That's really exciting. Yeah, I could imagine, I imagine there's some white space in this market and people are trying to build and don't know exactly how to do it. So it seems to be a really good opportunity to lean in.
Yeah, you did ask, if people are interested in getting involved. I would say our Discord it's like a healthy, medium-sized community, but so passionate and so in the weeds with excitement around this initiative and these details. So you jump into the AI video channel or the node operator channel in our Discord, and it's all people like benchmarking every piece of hardware, like tuning models to fit into certain amounts of VRAM on their cards, building these prototype apps on the network, debugging, thinking, how can I add this model? How can I add this pipeline? How can we make these things configurable? And it's actually, a lot of it is funded via sort of the open protocol based treasury, where people can make proposals and access funding to work on an initiative. So more so than on the video side, where a lot of the usage comes through Studio, here in the AI side, I actually see, tens, hundreds of community actors driving different pieces of this and fitting it together. So anyone excited about nerding out with us on this stuff, join the Livepeer Discord. You can find it from livepeer.org, and you'll be welcome with open arms. Join the AI video channel, and I think you'll find a bunch of other like-minded nerds who are excited to see the future here.
Yeah. And this is the beauty of these open protocols. I think I was reading the Livepeer forum and saw that one of the kind of test prototyping directions, the team is building a kind of front end and a product to make this kind of AI capability accessible. And they might go on to build a real business out of this. And that would be a win-win for the protocol and that team. And that's a kind of unique opportunity that exists here, where you don't need to be the kind of core, Livepeer team or the Livepeer Studio team to go build like a profitable business on top of this infrastructure. It's open, and you can start generating demand and tapping into the same supply that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a ton of appetite in the Livepeer community to provide some bootstrapping funding, some initial funding to the innovators or the builders that are sort of building on this in design partner mode, right? This is still being developed. It's not like there's a production product for them to rely on today, but you have a whole army of like innovators that want you to succeed, that are going to build what you need to make your app successful. And you don't get that kind of attention from a big enterprise SaaS platform either. So, I think you can access funding, you can access a community, you can access great technical partnership through these sort of open ecosystems that are, crypto token coordinated, where everyone is sort of a stakeholder in its success, which is just very different than what you see from a, especially non-public closed proprietary company with just a limited set of stakeholders who are just trying to, pick their target market and serve that, and that's it.
Yeah, makes sense. Are you guys up for some more personal topics for the last few minutes we have together?
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
So I know you've been working on Livepeer for 7+ years now. And before that, you've worked on multiple startups. So you're, 14, 15+ years into being founders and grappling with all the questions that come up. When you kind of like think, when you look at yourself today, what do you see as your core competencies? Like, what are you focused on doing? What are the responsibilities that you see as uniquely yours in the roles that you have? Maybe another way is like, what are the kind of like abilities that you're continuing to craft and see as like a core part of like your contribution to the companies you're working on?
Eric, you want to lead us off on this one? Yeah. I've been talking a bit.
I think as the founder, your ultimate responsibilities for the success of the company. So it's really it's like the test. Like, I think it needs to like approach it with the mentality of like, you got to do whatever it takes to get it done, right? Now, there are many different ways to do whatever it takes to get it done, right? Like, one is to like do it yourself. Second is to like, build a team around it to get it done, right? You kind of need to do a combination of many different things to get the job done. And for me, it's always it's been kind of like a very educational process to understand what my own strengths and weaknesses are, and how and making the decision of doubling down on areas that I am strong in, and then trying to fill the gap in areas that I'm not strong in. So first of all, I have to be very honest with myself in like what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I think that and once we get there, then I can think about like where it like what are things that's like worth the value investment versus what are things that I really need to get help in, and then it's like how do I get the help that I needed in order to ensure success, right? So I think that has especially been true for Livepeer in the way that's different in previous ventures, because Livepeer's journey is very unique, right? Like in this crypto world where the ways to build projects and to build companies around it is not very defined. Whereas, in previous ventures, there's more of a formula in how you would approach building a company, what kind of people you will need to get involved, and how do you distribute ownership, whatever it is, right? So if I have to even look at the way that Doug and I work together, that has shifted in very unique ways that has been shaped by the journey of Livepeer and kind of the space that we're building in, that would have been totally different if we were building in a different space. So like personally for me, I started out as the CTO, and really mostly focused on the technology side, and that's evolved and turned over time that I am now responsible for generating demand for Livepeer Studio, the product, right? So very much like a tradition, more like a sales and marketing role at the core, right? So over time, I've had to grapple with, like, am I actually good at doing sales and marketing myself, right? Like, and how do I learn these skills quickly, or get people to come and join us to help me succeed in my role, even though I don't come from a sales and marketing background.
Right. There is a way with that particular role that until you know how to sell what you've built, it's hard to have someone else do it. It's one of those things that a founder is uniquely suited to doing, especially before there is really a playbook.
Yeah.
Right. I would certainly say, like, rather than thinking of Eric as the, sales and marketing, guru, think of him as the, like, founder-led product expert who is engaging with the market in a very like product-led discovery and sales process. And as you said, Sina, I think that's, something that a startup is 10 times better off if a founder is doing and figures it out and learns and represents the company in the early days than something that can just be outsourced.
So I think that's like a very interesting example. So you kind of together as a team realized that generating demand is one of the most important things. How did you think through like how to build the team around that? Who leads it? Like what hires do you need to make? Because it's instructive, like it maybe like it's very different. Someone who's new to this would approach this set of problems versus like the ways that you might be able to realize which parts of this are critical or important or, trying to see around the corners. Like what was that thought process like for you?
Yeah, we've certainly been through a lot of iterations. It's also worth recognizing like Eric and I we have a lot of similarities. We're both like computer science backgrounds, technical first, product engineering oriented leaders, right? In our previous two startups, it was like I was VP Eng and he was CTO, and we sort of worked side by side as counterparts in building out the technology, right? And so, as Eric alluded to, I think something we've both worked on is being aware of our strengths, our weaknesses, and our blind spots, right? And being able to recognize when we have a blind spot and, be honest about that and seek, advising or mentorship or team member gap filling, solutions in those areas, right? So in terms of recognizing, generating demand is important. You could say in the early days, I wouldn't say we didn't think it was important, but I think we had a little bit of an optimistic hope that, hey, if you build an open protocol, they will come. Anyone can build on this thing. The software lets you build. Like, of course, people will build. Right now, it became pretty obvious we would have to, go to market, if you will. And I think we've always taken like a product and technology centric approach. Like, what can we build in order to do that? I think the thing we've iterated on quite a bit is, how do we interact with the market? How do we use design partners? How do we take what we hear from the market about what they need and let that inform what we're building? How do we just solve solutions for potential users of what they need versus just focus on the product we think we need to exist, right? And I think we've gone through some iterations that have had different positives and negatives, but I think the thing that's worked a lot in the last year in particular is Eric as a founder-led, product-centric person at the forefront of the market, being a point of interaction for the potential users and existing users has really accelerated things. So I'd say that's the takeaway that we were alluding to before, is there's no replacement for the founder working with and talking with users. And by the way, I acknowledge that's one of my weaknesses or areas that doesn't give me as much energy, is more on the, I guess what I'd say, like the traditional business demand generation side, though I have no shortage of that energy for engaging with the community that powers the network, that are the users of the network on the supply side that's building the network with us, but probably just more of a natural bend towards the build and product process and those helping us fulfill our vision rather than sort of the users. And that's just one of the trade-offs that I'm aware of in myself.
When you think about the things that bring you energy or your strengths and weaknesses, do you see ways in which that has changed over the last 15 years? Or are we like pretty kind of shaped as people and we are who we are?
That's a good question. Something I never get to do that I wish I could do, that I used to love to do, was, just to code and to solve the problems and to go and build something, right? I wish I had more time for it, but I think Livepeer, Eric alluded to the complexity of Livepeer. I can't underscore how much complexity it is to run a protocol, a community, a business, a set of stakeholders who are token holders, a set of stakeholders who are equity holders in the business, multiple product roadmaps for the supply side, for the demand side, for a go-to-market, for products ecosystem is building versus what studio is building, right? And
wow,
a lot of my
that's definitely hard mode.
yeah, a lot of my job is literally to be one of the only people in the world that has all of that complexity in their head and can instantly provide clarity or bridge the gap to any stakeholder, team member, et cetera. And that just requires a lot of context switching. I don't know if that gives me tremendous amounts of energy necessarily, but I think due to like external factors and life factors and whatnot, it's sort of, it's okay. It's like a job I'm like excited about doing and it fits within my life. And it's different than saying, okay, I'm going to like get a case of Red Bull and like re-architect the system and code for the next 14 hours, which is maybe more exciting at a different phase in life. Right. And so I think these sort of, external factors play into, and you find your new normal, as a result of those.
How do you hold your kind of like inner psychology? Do you find that do you ever get resentful or stressed about like all the kind of like crap you have to do that you don't care about? Or is there a way to hold this skillfully that you've kind of learned to tune into over time that anyone building a real thing in the world needs to do, right? Like now these things, what needs to be done, and you have to do what it takes ultimately.
One of the ways I think Eric and I are similar that plays to a tremendous advantage here is we're both very calm by nature, and we're both very balanced and like unemotional by nature as the default. And I think that probably helps a lot with, like you said, not getting frustrated, not getting resentful. We don't celebrate our wins as much as others might celebrate their wins. And we also probably don't take our losses as hard as other people take their losses. I think we're comfortable just reacting and putting one foot in front of the next and doing what needs to be done. So that works to our advantage in some ways. And in other ways, it's probably a challenge or frustrating for people that, we're always balanced and considering all options and whatnot, rather than making split emotional decisions. But I think the personality trait has helped us in this particular context. What do you think, Eric? You agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. One element that I would add is, like, I'm pretty excited about exploring new things. Right? I think that's just like my innate personality. And I've realized that over time, in order to explore new things well, you kind of have to like just invest yourself in it, right? Like, because if I don't put myself out there, if I don't put myself in it, then I'm not really able to perceive all the signal in the same way that I am when I'm actually in it and I feel vulnerable and I feel like I'm exposed. That's the best way to explore things. Right.
Like it has to be what you think about in the shower or like when you go to bed at night. Yeah.
It has to feel. You have to feel the intensity. Otherwise, it's not. You don't get the results. Right. Oftentimes. So that's how I kind of conduct myself in the way that I show up for work. Is I try to. What does that mean? It means I don't hold back when I jump into a new role that I don't know anything about, and I will like try to ask questions, and I try to ask dumb questions, right? And because that's the fastest way for me to learn, and I hope, and over time I think I've been able to do that without feeling like an imposter as much, because I've internalized that. That's just kind of like what an entrepreneur does. It's like you just like are trying to learn stuff that you don't know about, and for like as an entrepreneur, you're by default a novice, right? You're trying to go into a new space. You're trying to build something that's new, right? So so just embracing that, embracing being a novice and being comfortable doing that, but like using all the experience that I've learned over time to inform how I behave as a novice. I think there's an art in doing that, right? And that's what I focus on.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Yeah, there's a way in which it requires vulnerability, multiple leaps of faith, like intellectual honesty. It's like you have to be kind of real as a person, I feel, to make it. Well, maybe we can close on that note. I know we've been talking for some time, but thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having us. Great discussion.
Yeah.
A lot of golden gems.
Hey, I'm going to make a small ask here. If you've been listening to these conversations and want to support what we're doing here, I would really, really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review for the podcast wherever you're listening to it. This might seem like a small thing, but it will really help other people also discover the show. Thank you. I'm grateful to be able to do this and look forward to being here together again soon.